Thank you for the introduction and having me at the event. I'm very honored to be here. And today I will give a little bit of an update about the Open Infra Foundation and a few of our projects, namely OpenStack and Starling X. So I work for the Open Infra Foundation as Director of Community, and as part of that role, I am a Community Manager for Starling X. And since this January, I'm also a Community Manager for one of our other projects called Kata Containers. So for those of you who may not know much about the Open Infrastructure Foundation, we are a nonprofit organization and we are supporting open source software development communities. As the name suggests, that means that our projects are in the software infrastructure space, and that means projects from CI/CD through container runtime, all the way to a cloud platform. And if you think about the software infrastructure space in our modern digital world, that is almost like a public good, because most of us are relying on some kind of software infrastructure stack to be able to do our daily routine and work. So this is something that everybody relies on. And because of that, it really is a prime space for open source collaboration, and really just for both users as well as vendor companies to collaborate. And to show that, like you can see the member companies that the Open Infra Foundation has, and in the telecom industry context, you can see how there are telecom vendor companies as platinum members, such as Ericsson and Huawei, and Wind River also has a good chunk of business in the telecom market. And if you look at our gold members, you will see several telecom operators like China Mobile or China Telecom in Asia, or T-Systems in Europe, to mention a few examples. So this really shows how there is active collaboration in the corporate world when it comes to open source infrastructure. And today, we are kind of living a new era of infrastructure opportunities with the new technology evolution, like AI and new use cases popping up. And this is actually a $1 trillion market. And it is a huge opportunity for open infra and open infra projects, but not just the projects, but also you who are part of the open infra ecosystem. So let's dive into all this a little bit further. I brought you a slide to show OpenStack's history, because this project really is in the heart of technology evolution in the telecom space recently when it comes to, again, the software infrastructure layer. So here you can see that OpenStack, the community, delivered 29 releases so far in the past 14 years, all of them on time. But it's not what's interesting here. If you think about the telecom industry and NFV as network function virtualization within that, as one of the latest evolution path in terms of how a telecom infrastructure stack has evolved, then you can see that cloud computing was really a starting point and an accelerator for NFV. And OpenStack as an open source cloud platform is what made this available to everyone around the globe, operators, vendors, as well as individuals. So with access to an open source cloud platform, the adoption and evolution of NFV just accelerated. Like you can see how Etsy NFV was established in November 2012. Which is a standards body that does collaborate with open source communities. And another similar example is the Open RAN O-RAN Alliance, which was created at the beginning of 2018, which is another standards group who also collaborates with open source communities and does some of their activities in the open through their software community. And at CNFV, the group has been closely collaborating with OpenStack, and today the Starling X community is working really closely together with the ORAN Alliance and the software community there. And a few more examples to mention from open source infrastructure and telecommunications history. You can see that Kubernetes, which is another pillar of today's modern infrastructure stack, was created in 2014. The OpenFV project followed closely and then transitioned into Anacat in 2021. And you can also see the ONAP logo on the slide in 2017. So this really shows how the ecosystem evolved and how, again, the access to an open source cloud platform just accelerated innovation as well as collaboration in this industry. So in 2014, at the Open Infra, or well, at that time, OpenStack Summit, we had Toby Ford on the keynote stage from AT&T talking about this acceleration and how OpenStack was in the heart of it and how that cloud platform was an enabler for telecom operators to be able to build a software stack from multiple vendors and how that is revolutionizing that market. And that market opportunity was actually very similar to that $1 trillion opportunity that we have today. But having access to a project like OpenStack in itself is not enough. So what the Open Infra Foundation, our staff, as well as our communities are focusing on is really to provide a space for open collaboration. And the Open Infra Foundation is fostering collaboration by reaching out to ecosystem members and ensure that they all participate and take part of the process of building, maintaining, and enhancing the software projects in the infrastructure space that our communities are working on. And this is a call to action to you as well, that if you are not involved yet, then please do so, because that's the only way for the communities to have your requirements, the needs that you have towards infrastructure to be able to run the use cases that you want, as well as to make sure that the software is developed in a way that is compatible with what you need and what you're currently relying on. Collaborative software development in open source is the most sustainable way to maintain and develop infrastructure software further. And through that collaborative effort, by today, 9 of the 10 largest telecom networks and operators on the world are powering their networks with OpenStack. So this obviously works. Now, let's take a little closer look at this infrastructure. So as you look into the modern use cases and where technology is evolving, you see that there is a movement, and there has been a movement for years now, to bring workloads closer to users, humans or machines alike. It really doesn't matter at this point. And by taking the cloud concept and deploying it everywhere outside of large data centers as well by today, you can see on the slide the little dots, the graphs, diagrams, that they can grow large and they look complex. And they are not even big. The drawings are not big, but it already does look complex. So we have to accept that today's modern infrastructure is going to be complex, but it doesn't mean that you cannot find a simple way to manage it. And another interesting phenomenon that you can see in terms of how infrastructure and architecture is evolving is that most large deployments and many of the use cases, like think about connected cars and autonomous driving and several of the AI type use cases, like you end up with a geographically distributed infrastructure that usually follows two types of models, one that managed centrally and the other one that is managed in a distributed way. So that is a very interesting technology evolution step and infrastructure architecture evolution step. So let's see how our projects are supporting these. Starling X is a distributed cloud platform that is a fusion between very well-known and widely used components like OpenStack, Kubernetes, Linux kernel, and the list goes on. But this is also a project with which you can take OpenStack and Kubernetes and take them outside of one single data center and deploy and manage them in a geographically distributed system on a large scale with ease. So this is where automation and orchestration play a huge role. And this community has a very deep understanding about how complex infrastructures work, especially again in a geographically distributed architectural way. And they are building the platform with added components to those open source building blocks that I mentioned already, with which you can deploy a distributed system with different types of high availability configurations, like how you see on the diagram on this slide. And this community is also, as I mentioned, working closely with the ORAN community. And what this brings into the platform, even though it is not a specifically telecom focused platform, but it does have a lot of features that are highly applicable in the telecom industry, like the O2 interface support for ORAN compliance. And what that gives you is that you're able to onboard network functions on top of a Starling X Cloud from different vendors without too much or barely any integration overhead. It is supposed to work, again, because the community is working with the software community in ORAN to make sure that the specifications also make their way into implementation and testing, and what is specified as a standard does work in the end product that is deployable and usable. And the latest release of Starling X as of today is 9.0, and you can see how the community is working on a lot of things that are crucial today, like being able to configure a system, like what kind of hardware features are available at a site. With today's workloads are depending on acceleration devices, this is very important. Or things like sustainability and being able to configure and manage power consumption and power usage. These things are very, very crucial today. And taking a look at OpenStack, you can see a similar trend with OpenStack as well in terms of increasing performance. Make sure that you have access to acceleration devices like GPUs, and you can use GPUs like how you're doing with CPUs in a virtualized environment for a long, long time now. And you have virtualized GPUs and not just have access to them, but also being able to migrate your workload from one machine to the other. So now you have access to that with vGPUs as well, and not just vCPUs. Like this very quick demo shows you how simple and easy it is. Like if you have a maintenance window, then you can migrate off your workload from the machine to another machine. And as I was just explaining that to you, it was already done. There was only a really brief pause in the workload, and now it is running on a different machine. And all this is possible not just because the community with the users and developers, but also the entire ecosystem around it. So you really have to think about all the companies and individuals who are working on this software, as well as, again, companies getting involved in this ecosystem, hiring the people who are working on the open source code, and also making sure that feedback and participation happens within the open source communities. The Open Infra entire ecosystem is currently over 110,000 members. And if that doesn't include you, then again, this is your call to action to get involved. And just a little brief look into the future. I talked a lot about, cloud computing and how that accelerated the evolution in the telecom space on the infrastructure side. And as cloud computing evolves, cloud computing and networks are kind of starting to melt into one. You can check this, for instance, the Compute Force Network working group that China Mobile is running is a prime example to working towards like having those closely working together. And 6G is already not just on the horizon, but discussions and activities already started in that area. You can look at how ORAN is and virtual RAN is accelerating the same way as NFV did in the not too far past. And a good example is Vodafone's deployments and rollouts in Europe that are actually using and depending on Starlink X. And I don't think that there is a presentation today where AI is not mentioned. In the telecom segment, it is still a question that in what way AI will be utilized. But AI is definitely pointing towards that path of we are having complex systems, so we need automation and optimization to be able to manage those systems efficiently and in compliance with the 5 nines, and I heard 6 nines requirements for the telecom industry in terms of availability. So there is a space for AI here, and I'm super excited to see how this will all work. And before I conclude, just one more reminder in terms of like looking into how opportunities arise. And at the same time, if you look at proprietary software, and depending on proprietary software, it probably feels like that it is something that is certain, that you have control over. You have a partnership with a vendor company, and that gives you some level of safety. However, if you look at Broadcom's VMware acquisition and how much uncertainty that introduced into the market, then you can clearly see that depending only on proprietary software, especially again on the infrastructure space, is just too risky. So we are seeing a big uptake, and over 60% of Open Infra members having at least one customer migrated over from VMware to OpenStack. So I'm super excited to see OpenStack gaining more and more users, and with that, having the ecosystem grow even further and being even more diverse. And the last call to action on this to you, check out the opportunities to join the Open Infra Foundation as a member, or join as an individual member and start getting active in our communities. This is your time to do it. And with that, thank you so much for your attention. And if you have any questions, please reach out to us after the event.